Okay, let's continue with the Plunge of Hell. So you've already seen the first video in which I talked about the Plunge of Hell in Help Is On The Way, but up until the Plunge of Hell. And now we're going to look at the Plunge of Hell itself. I honestly struggled to even release this because I know there's no way that you could appreciate this out of context. Okay, it's on a piano. You don't have all the intricacies of what's happening for orchestra. It's a recording, so it's not even live. So I doubt that you were able to appreciate the beauty that's in this chord, the Plunge of Hell. But hopefully I can explain it and give you a little bit of a teaser. Okay, so what we had before was as follows, if you watched part one. And then we get to the Plunge of Hell. So part of the effect of the Plunge of Hell is that what was happening before was super pure and light. Listen carefully. Notice how it becomes very muddy all of a sudden. One other thing I want to bring to your attention is the last two beats of this section. If you look at the musical score, there's a crescendo. This is the symbol for the crescendo. And it goes from piano, which is soft, to forte. So that means the orchestra, when they're on this chord, this complicated chord, on a piano, once you hit it, the sound decays, so I can't increase the volume. I would have to do this. It's not really justified here. But what I want you to appreciate is when this is for orchestra, you're going to hear this kind of really complicated chord and getting larger. It's really growing in volume. You have to, I'm going to do it again, and I want you to really imagine an orchestra doing this, but doing a crescendo, meaning growing in volume on this note. Now, I want to examine this chord itself, and this will require some imagination. I will inspire you, but you're going to have to use imagination. If you can't use your imagination, go home. Seriously, go home. Why bother? Just kidding. But no. Listen to the bottom of this chord. Listen to the double basses and the cellos. Sounds quite different, right? It feels way less resistance in the sound. It feels much calmer. It sounds very resonant. Okay, let's listen again. And in the score, I marked non divisi. So what that means is the cello. Usually when you give more than one note to an instrument in the string, they do divisi, meaning half the section does the lower note and half does the upper. So here, those are two notes played simultaneously, and traditionally half the cellos would do the bottom, half would do the top. But here I put non divisi, meaning they're going to have to use their bow and press on both strings. And this interval is called the perfect fifth. You don't need to know what it is, but on a string instrument, at least for cellos and violins and violas, it's actually difficult to get in tune because you have to stretch the same finger directly across. And inevitably throughout a performance, the strings become go out of tune. So if you put your finger directly across, it might not be fully in tune. So it takes a lot of concentration, a lot of effort. So just imagine the sound of this chord. Can you imagine like the effort that's going to have to go just for the cellos? Now, so we have the double basses and the cellos here. And on top of the violas, violas are kind of this medium string instrument that goes in between the violins and the cellos and basses. So it's kind of la liaison. So before, without the violas, now with the violas. So notice the addition of this other instrument really makes it very muddy. In addition, look at this the score. You see that kind of those three kind of marks above the viola notes. That's a tremolo. And tremolo means you kind of do this on the string. You go back and forth with the bow. So you can't do it in piano. It's not the same in piano. But you have to imagine that we have this chord. And you're going to have like this rustling in the chord. Okay? Now listen to the other elements of the chord. We have the top. So amidst, I can't play everything. So with the top, we have the bottom, and down here in the ish bottom, we're going to have this rustling that it's going to be too loud for just the violas to be heard. So we won't hear that rustling. You won't be like, oh, I hear the violas doing a tremolo. But you'll feel this kind of like a leaf shaking or something kind of shaking that's just not very audible. One other thing I'd like to point out are the brass. Okay, we talked about the brass in part 1, but listen again to this, the Plunge of Hell. So on its own, we don't hear the turbulence, right? But that I was playing was the trombones, okay, and the trumpets. And we talked about in part 1 that they have a mute, which again is kind of a stopper that goes in and chokes the sound. So listen to this kind of choked sound. But on top of this, technically on bottom, we have the French horns, which are doing this. So listen to the clash between the French horns and the other two brass, the trombones and the trumpets. Okay? You hear the clash now? And one thing I really hope you appreciate when you hear the live performance, but for the live performance, just enjoy it, relax, and don't try to analyze it because then you're not going to appreciate it. But the French horns, this is extremely, extremely low register. If you are familiar at all with Shostakovich's music, one of my favorite composers, he uses this a lot, especially I think in the Fifth Symphony. It's kind of like very ballady sound. And so the French horns, though on a piano that sounds nice and resonant, on a French horn, it's going to feel really like the earth is shaking, but in a way that's unstable. Like a tuba down there would be much more solid, but the French horns, there's going to be something almost unstable about it, and kind of like a volcano that's like breaking or clay is breaking. It's just going to feel really uncomfortable. So in totality, this entire chord And don't forget the different parts. So let's just review the different parts. We have the bottom. And we have like 4 different parts to the chord. So unfortunately my hands can't reach it all, but let me play the whole chord now. And we talk about the end. There's a crescendo, sudden of sound, and then we continue. So now to end, let me play this whole Plunge of Hell section, okay? I had to play a little bit on it. I hope you enjoyed, and we'll see you in the next episode. Have a good day.